To get started with the account creation, log in into your AWS account using your administrator user, navigate to the correct region, and then navigate to the IAM console. Open this. Click on the user groups. At the top here, click on create group. The name of our group will be Fargate. We are not adding a user for now. Then I will assign some permissions to this group. So let's start with the AWS managed policies first. The first policy will be giving this user VPC access. So make sure you select the correct policy. So it's a VPC full access because the user will be creating a whole VPC for our cluster. So you can select multiple policies. The second one will be elastic load balancing, read-only access. We'll need the user to be able to access the ELB console and also get to read the elastic load balancers details. The other one will be Route 53 full access. For this tutorial, we are using Route 53, but you are not limited to using Route 53 as your DNS provider. If you have something like Cloudflare, you can use that one as long as you make sure you have access to that domain to manage and modify records. This policy is over permissive, so you need to restrict access. When you open the manage policy, you'll see like it has a lot of things in it. So make sure you add restrictions, and also you can decide to move these permissions into the custom policy that we'll be adding. So once you select those three policies, you can click on create group. Once your group is created, you can open it to confirm the managed policies are attached correctly. Click on the permissions tab and you can see we have the three selected permissions. The last step here is to attach an IAM custom inline policy. On this button at the top left, click on create inline policy. Then here we'll be using JSON. I've prepared a policy, so I'll just paste it in here and then we can walk through the different sections of that policy. You can find the same policy attached to the shared links of the video. So the first set of permissions you're adding are for IAM, get and list items. This might be over permissive in some setups, so you might need to restrict the read-only permissions here. For this case, we are just doing this for all resources for this user. Then we also have some EKS permissions here for listing, registering, and creating the clusters. These 5 permissions apply to all resources. You can add conditions after resource to just restrict this, because this is also too open. Then the second set of permissions is just some read and write permissions for EKS and also for IAM. And then at the bottom here, you can see we are restricting these resources because these are write permissions for all the resources that are relating to the cluster. You can see at the end here, I'm using the prefix to the name of the cluster like this. So you can use your own name depending on how you will be naming your cluster. So for cluster write actions, they will be restricted by this, the region, the account ID, and also the prefix of the name of the cluster. You also have the identity provider configuration, which is also restricted by the name prefix. Then here we have the access entry, also restricted by the name prefix we'll be using within our resources. The Fargate profiles, pod identity association, the add-ons, the node groups are also all restricted by the name prefix. For the S3 bucket access, you can see the restriction at the bottom here for the specific bucket that we'll be using for our infrastructure step. Then for the role, the OIDC provider, you can see we are not restricting the provider, but for the role it's using the prefix because it will also be managed by the infrastructure code. Then we have the group. We are passing in the group name that we just created. You can see it at the top here, right here. Then let's go to the other section. At the bottom, we have additional S3 access. So we have to also restrict the write permission to a specific path in the bucket so that we don't overwrite other paths using this user. Just enter the ARN of the bucket and then append the path that this permission will be restricted to. So that's it for the custom policy. Once you paste in your custom policy, you can just click on next. And then for the policy name, we'll just call it custom policy. And then we can create it. Once it's created, it will show up here under the group and under the permissions tab. You can see it. You can even expand it to view So something else, make sure when you are setting up this bucket, if you have an existing bucket, you can use the name of that bucket for your Terraform state. If you don't have an existing bucket, while creating that bucket, you'll make sure you use this name. So we are done creating our user group. The next thing is to create a user for our group. So navigate to the users right here on the left, click on create user. So our user will use this name, create Fargate. We need this user to have access to the management console and also to the CLI. So we'll select provide access to the AWS management console. It's recommended to use Identity Center, but to keep this tutorial short, we'll be using the IAM user approach, the old approach. And then for the password, you can select auto-generate, but for this tutorial, I'll be setting a custom password. If you are creating this password for a real user, you have to make sure this option here is selected so that when the user is signing up or trying to access their account, they can reset their password. But for this case, I'll be selecting this because I already have a strong password in place for this user. Once you enter everything, then you can click on next. On the next tab, you need to assign this user to a particular group. You can select multiple groups, but for our case, you only created one group. Once you select the group, click next. You can add tags. So once you add your tag, your resource tags, you can just click on create user. And now the user is created. If you selected the option to reset a password once you create the user, you can download this CSV file and share it to that particular user. But for this case, we are creating our own user and we selected not to reset the password. So the password we set is the one that will be used. So make sure you save this password and also you save this username. Once you're done, you can just return to the users list. Next, it will be time to now log in using our new user, set up the access keys, and also configuring those keys on our local machine to make sure that Terraform can access them.